Hi, and welcome to Be Above Leadership's podcast, The World Needs Our Weirdness. Lively and unscripted conversations for anyone who has ever felt they were a little bit different. I'm Ursula Pottinga and one of the founding partners of Be Above.
And I'm Betz, the other founding partner. Join us as we share our own weirdness and how this has shaped how we see the world. We'll be exploring coaching, neuroscience, consciousness, and anything else that takes our fancy.
Hello, hi, Anne. How are you? Welcome,
Hi, Ursula.
everybody, to another episode of our podcast, The World Needs Our Weirdness. And today we are going to talk about that we are both scientists and we are also mystics. So, that we are scientists is for all of you listening that know us at Be Above Leadership. You know about our advanced coaching program, you know about the relational trauma program, and you know that the run-through line is neuroscience. We are deeply interested and
Informed. We're very well
informed,
informed
absolutely,
in terms of
very well
neuroscience
researched.
and
Yeah,
social science to some degree.
yeah.
And it's actually been a joy to explore that because sometimes people will ask me like, why do you like this? And I'm like, when I was growing up, there was this toy and it was called, I think there was the Invisible Man and the Invisible Woman. And it was like a clear plastic sheet over a coating over like all the organs and things like that in this person, this doll. And, I feel like neuroscience has given me a little bit, to some degree, of the clear plastic sheet that
Mm.
enables me to see into the system, to see what's going on. And that just makes me so more effective as a coach and a mom and a partner and all of this. So I love it for that.
Yeah. And I love that visual and I love that metaphor because what's coming to my mind is when I do this, especially when I do it in my own life, but also for clients and students, but when I do it for myself, it actually makes me really happy.
Yeah, me too. I think Carl Sagan said understanding is joyous.
Yes, it feels like I've got all these keys to all these doors, and when the door feels like it's shut, I've got a key right here that I know it will open the door, and when that opens, there is just so
And it
much
makes sense. And
clarity. It makes sense.
the
Yeah.
client then said they know what to do going forward. So that is joyous. And as Ursula said, a lot of you know us because of, that's the
Yes.
association, the neuroscience expertise and ability to translate and apply to coaching. And if you hang around either one of us for any length of time, you'll also know we're quite mystical. And
Yes.
part of the other joy of our life is integrating the science and the mystery and not feeling like we have to abandon either one. And I know there have been times in my life where it has felt to me like if I really lean into the science, I'll lose the mystery.
Hmm.
Or if I really lean into the mystery, it's not really grounded. And then I've abandoned the science. And I think what we've evolved to out of working in both areas for 25 years is this ability to hold both and say both can be true and both can inform us as
Yeah.
humans.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that for me, I actually love to have a little mystery. I love to have some areas where I go, for example, when I say a blessing or when I pray, there is something that shifts within me. There is something that is going on. I feel more at peace when I'm stressed and I pray. So there is something going on. And also, many a times it's like, well, do I actually really want to know exactly what's
Might
happening?
be okay that I don't.
Maybe it's
I'm
okay that I
reminded
don't.
I'm reminded of this story from earlier in probably from like literally 15 or 16 years ago when you and I were we were doing a training. And I think on the second day, it was like a 3-day training. And the second day, we kind of looked at each other and went, this feels kind of flat. And
Hmm.
we had the realization that we forgot to pray
Yes.
and that we were there's sort of two ways that I look at that. One way on the mystery side is we forgot to call in any other energetic help that might be available. That's a
Yes.
possibility. I'm open to that. Do I know that for sure? No. On the human level, there is something about saying a blessing, setting an intention that helps shape the energetic container of a training. And we know there's a practical thing in the brain. It's called the reticular activating system. It lives fairly low down in the brain. And the oversimplification of it is that it's a filter in terms of what information it allows through. And what I often say, Ursula knows, she probably says, they probably say the same thing, is that if you had to pay attention to everything in your environment, your head would explode
Yes.
because there's too much data. So it only really allows through that which is relevant. And so example is I bought a red Toyota RAV4 and all of a sudden Toyota RAV4s were relevant and red ones even more so. And I saw more of them.
Yeah.
And that's your reticular activation system or activating system. And it could be that setting an intention, saying a blessing, just, for harmony, for peace, for learning, those are all the things that we say a blessing for when we're training, that it just makes us look more for that and see more of that and respond to more of that. So it could be there's a real practical thing and it
Oh,
settles
absolutely.
our
I
own
think
nervous
I
system.
think everything that's mystical is also practical. I mean,
Ooh, say more.
I see this in my own life. So, for example, I think as human beings, sometimes we have a tendency to want to control things.
Oh, you think? Uh-huh. Some people more than others.
Some people more than others. And what is helpful about setting an intention, a blessing, a prayer, and this is whatever spiritual background, spiritual theology, whatever you believe in. I mean, it's all fine. Basically, Anne and I, for us, there is no difference. I mean, spirit is love, and that's really all that matters. So anyway, I find that when I try and really hold on to things and control things, and then I pray, all of a sudden I feel like I can let go. There's something about trust and surrender that I can't get from a human because they're unreliable, most of them. But I feel spirit is reliable. Spirit gives me this sense of no, Ursula, you don't need to control it. You just need to surrender it and you need to trust it. And in the process, I let go. And that
Yeah.
is practical and helpful.
You know, I think a lot about this interesting, I have this thing that I believe, and I think you believe it as well, that when we get into paradoxical conversations, that's when the conversation has gone deep enough.
Yes.
And so I think about the idea that, it's present in many faith traditions, it's probably most associated with Buddhism, which is non-attachment,
Yes.
the idea of being non-attached. And it can sometimes be seen as just being sort of lazy, like, oh, whatever, I'm not attached. And I think about the paradox of on the human level, I'm committed. Like I can be very committed to something, very committed to our business, very committed to what I'm doing, like there as a presence and a human energy, but not attached.
Yeah.
And if the Fritz Perls, who is a therapist, psychologist from like the 60s, he had this very beautiful saying, don't push the river.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you and I live by that. We're committed, but where the non-attachment comes in is we don't push the river. Like if we're really committed, we were really committed to doing an in-person version of our training. where we did in person for the first 3 days, and then we were going to do virtual. We were going to do that, I think, in 2022. I don't remember what year it was, post-COVID.
Yeah.
We were committed to it. We did everything about it, put our
Yeah.
energy there. The
Got the
river
hotel, the whole
did
9 yards.
not go. There was no river. We had one enrollment. So we had to go like, okay, we're not, it didn't happen because we didn't bring our human energy. It didn't happen because it didn't want to happen.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
don't know why, but we said, okay, let
All
go.
right.
No blame. Move on.
Whatever.
Do
Moving on.
something else.
Right. No, I totally agree. It's and I have really increased that ability over the last 15 years. I was definitely attached to outcomes. I mean, especially,
Committed and attached.
committed and
Me
attached,
too.
particularly, it's funny. I think it was particularly when I think about 17, 18 years ago, you remember, like I would check our bank account daily. It's like every day I would go and it's like, oh, how much money do we have? And it was like, ah. And then over time, I sort of went like, well, I don't need that. I know abundance will flow in, money will flow out. And yeah, I mean, every now and again, it's probably a good idea to just check and make sure that where are we? But over the last 18 years, I have so let go of that attachment that it has to be a certain way and trust that whatever will show up will show up. And in the process, we are more abundant.
Yeah, I was going to say the more we became less worried and
Yeah.
live from fear and try to control it, and the more that we trusted that we would always have enough. And I really love the word enough.
Mhm.
In fact, I think I vibrate to it even more than I like prosperity and I like abundance. I do. I like an abundance. I like that feeling, but I want to feel that I can live with enough because I think the enoughness takes you off the hamster wheel. And
Yes.
there have been many, many times where people have come to us, are wonderful, loving, amazing people, maybe some of whom are watching this, I don't know, who have come to us with ideas about how we could be bigger
Yes.
and better and scale, like how can you scale? And generally when we check in with ourselves, the answer is we don't want the complexity that would come with that. We just want enough.
Yes. And it is enough.
It is enough. It's always been enough. We've always been looked
Yeah.
after.
Yes.
And the more that I trust that, and again, I think there is a spiritual level and a human level
Always.
because the more that I trust, so, and I'm just sort of open, and maybe we won't know any of this until we die. And when we die, maybe it'll just be a huge void, nothing
Flash,
else happens.
flash of light.
Who cares? Whatever. Or
Yeah.
maybe all will be revealed and we'll find out we were wrong, or we'll find out we were right. I don't know. And I'm okay with not knowing.
Yeah.
But on the spiritual level, being, not being in fear takes me to a place where most spiritual teachers and people say there's more opportunity for flow if you're not in fear. But on the human level, when I'm not in fear and I talk to a prospective student or someone wants this very, very almost never happens, but occasionally somebody wants their money back, occasionally. Um, very few times over 20 years, and we're not in fear about it. I think that also the other like if probably a better example because I talk to a lot of prospective students
Yeah.
and I never say you have to register now because the price will go up tomorrow. In fact, there was a time just for one of our last pods where it really was getting full, and I'm
Yeah.
like, you do need to register because this is getting full. And I am not saying that as a sales technique. I'm really
This is
not.
actually the truth.
It's really the truth. There will not be room. And I felt really weird about saying it because I want people to feel that they've been able to step through the door by complete choice.
Yeah.
And
No,
that
I totally agree with you. I mean, I have the same when I talk to students, I'll answer the questions and I'm, clearly passionate about what we do and delighted by it and in love with it and convinced it is the right thing to do. But I always say, so now you have all the information, just ponder, sit with it. If it's right for you, it will be right for you. And if it's not, well, you'll find something else.
and if it's not, You know, at least I hope that I always communicate if it's not right or it's not right now, or you would rather go do something else, we still hold you in the envelope of love.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, you don't have to sign up in order for us to like you,
Yeah.
right? It's
No,
not
absolutely.
we
No,
like you
that's
already
not a
because
condition.
it's not, because you're a human being, and I want you to feel like there's always full choice. And I remember years ago, you cite one of the reasons we created our neuroscience program was you were looking for something because you needed CCUs for your
Yeah.
PCC.
Yeah.
And you signed up for this program that was supposed to be advanced, and it was really basic. And they wouldn't give you one penny of your money back, even though you only did one class.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
to me, that's fear. That's
Yeah.
the vibration of fear. And what I know on the human level is you would never recommend that to anybody. And if
Absolutely.
anybody ever asked you, you're going to tell them that story
Yeah.
rather than, you know, being gracious and understanding people's needs are different. And there's just, to me, it's just grasping. And
Yeah.
on a spiritual level, that's just not who I want to, that's not who I want to be. And sometimes that's hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's
So
hard.
what I'm really noticing in this conversation, we are really talking about the two worlds that we are constantly inhabiting, that we're constantly dancing in. That's the world of human, where we need to pay our bills and look at the calendar and get the groceries and all
Support our children and, buy
all that.
cat food, which
And,
is really expensive for 5 cats, I have to tell you.
have to deal with partners and, beloveds and grandchildren with tantrums and all of that on the human level. But then there's also the spiritual level where we can enter into the mystery of our existence and tap into this other field, this other energy that will support us. So I'm curious, what's your take on the difficulty that some people have integrating the field of humanity, of humanness, and also being a spiritual being?
Well, I have a couple of things to say. It's a great question, then I want to hear your take on it. There's a couple of things. One is, um, you know, life throws shit at us.
No
And,
kidding.
you could hold it on the spiritual level like it's a test, or you could just say life is random. I don't know.
Yes.
Again,
Yep.
I do not know. It may just be totally random.
Yep.
But, you can come off of a retreat, feel very connected to your heart, and, something happens. You have a flat tire, or somebody bumped into me in the Target parking lot the other day. And, um, that's the kind of, okay, now what? And we have these human responses, human bodies, human fears that are not necessarily particularly easy to transcend.
Yes.
But like lifting weights in the gym, and sometimes I'll say this to my clients when they're dealing with a really shitty thing, I will say, you are lifting a heavy weight in the spiritual gym.
Mhm.
And a perspective, again, it may not be the right perspective, but it is a perspective, is you have this weight because you're ready to lift it.
Mhm.
And you will be stronger coming out of this.
Yeah.
So I think that it's the humanness of us. And maybe
Well, and
it's not particularly articulate, but what do you think?
I think it sort of goes back to control. As humans, we think like we've got all this capacity of thinking and doing and, managing life, and we're so smart and all of that. And I really see when we are really coming to a point of a real crisis. I have noticed that when I'm facing a real crisis, my sense of spirituality expands because I'm realizing I've reached the end of the road of all my knowing, of all my advice, of all my tears, of all my anger, of all my everything. I've come to the end of the road. There's a roadblock. And the only way to get over the roadblock is by praying and connecting to
Surrender
spirit
and surrendering
and
and
surrendering. And really hard things in my life have taught me this this intersection of saying, you know what, I think I'm really just at the end of the of this intersection. Now I need help. I need help from spirit because I don't know anymore where to go, what to do.
I think that, they talk about, there's that famous story, I think it's a Jesus story where there's those footsteps in the sand. And,
Yes.
the person says, when I was going through my hardest time, why weren't there two sets of footsteps? And Jesus responds, that's when I carried you. And I
Yeah.
say that, and it's like what your grandma puts on the wall. Sort of. But I still think there's something about those times of crisis that call for that, where really the only thing to do is surrender, that can be wonderful, amazing teaching times.
Yes.
And I think it's the middle times that are hard. It's sort of like you come to that place of complete surrender, and there can be, amazing gifts there. And you go to the place where you're feeling really good and like you got the lesson, you came out of the retreat and you're good and life is flowing, and that's fine. And then it's the stuff in the middle. And I'm
Mm.
thinking about, so it's Target parking lot. So I was in the Target parking lot, and I'm not
Hmm.
really shopping at Target right now, by the way, but I had to go there because in Santa Fe, we don't have a lot of options. So this is the one time that I went to Target over the last like 4 months. And I come the one time I go because I got to get something that
It's like there is a lesson right there,
right
right?
there, right? Nobody else in Santa Fe has. And I have a new car that I really, really like. And I come out and first I can't find my car, which is sort of weird. And then someone's standing by my car writing a note. And she says, yeah, I brushed against your car. And
Mm.
I'm getting ready to go away for a bit. And I'm just like, my first response is, shit.
Mm.
Because I don't have time to deal with this before I go away.
Yeah.
Um, but what was interesting is I caught myself. And I think that's part of you said something, I'll tell the rest of the story because it's important, but you said something to me a long time ago, that really consciousness is about shortening the gap.
Yes.
And so, I could have a very long gap, like of, a few weeks where I'm still mad at this woman for bumping into my car
Yeah.
accidentally, not on purpose. But in that moment, I had a pretty short gap
Yes.
because I've practiced shortening the gap. So the gap was pretty short. So at first I'm like, I don't, shit, I don't need this. It's not what I need. And I'm sort of not really yelling at her, but I'm venting a little, a
Yeah. Yeah.
little bit,
Yeah. Yeah.
making her feel bad.
Yeah.
Then um, I just had her give me her phone number. I said, I won't do through insurance. I'll let you know what it is. I said, it might not be, I'm going away for a bit, so it might not be till I come back, but give me your number and I'll keep you posted. And then I so did that. And I got in my car and I remembered that I have a really good body shop that was actually pretty close by. So just drove over there. And I said, hey, what do you think? And he said, it's not a problem. We don't need to repaint it. I'm just going to buff it out for you and it'll cost you $30. And I said, can you do it Monday? Because I had some time on Monday. And he said, yep. And so there was no issue. And I think what I want to say, and what I said to this woman as she was saying, no, I'm so sorry. I said, it's just a thing, it's not a human.
Mm.
And I was fine. And I drove, and I'm like, let me see if I can actually manage this and not have it be a thing. And I was able to. And I think on the human level, what happened was my ability to close the gap and not be in a stress response actually made me find a very workable solution very quickly.
Yeah. I
And I
agree.
went to my body shop guy, who's this cute little guy named Leo, with just brightness and light. And he was like, I would love to help you out. Yeah, Monday's no problem. Come in at 10.
Yeah.
And I was in and out in half an hour on Monday. So
Yeah.
it was like the solution unfolded because I didn't get caught in unnecessary drama
Hmm.
about it. I closed the gap of the drama.
Yeah.
And on the very practical level, when we do that, we see potential solutions more easily.
Yeah.
And on the spiritual level, maybe something shifted because I didn't make her wrong and I didn't ruin her, hopefully didn't ruin her day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even in our program, in quarter 4, it in the advanced coaching program, we start really talking about energy. And I really, every time I do quarter 4, it becomes really clear to me. It really is all about energy. Now, whatever you feel, dear listener, this means to you, whether you believe it or you don't believe it, but this is an example. Your energy of flow and calmness and openness also let your brain see the possibility rather than going, "Rrrr," and then the field really narrows and it gets
Yep.
worse. And when you get angry with the people who can't do it, and there's this ripple effect. So I think that energy really, really shapes in a very unseen and mystical way. It can shape outcomes.
Well, and I want to add to that, and I have a quote that I want to share in a minute, but the reason we talk about energy in the fourth quarter, and our program is a year long. So we're talking, we're 75, we're almost all the way through a full year of looking at neuroscience as it applies to human beings. And one of the reasons we talk about energy at the end is we can really talk about how it is grounded
Mhm.
in science, the parts of it that are grounded in science and the parts of it that we don't know yet.
Yes.
And there's a percentage of very, very practical that when I can come to groundedness in myself, my brain can see more clearly. That is practical. That's just not even the angels gave me the answer and reminded me of the body shop. That is just strictly practical. And once we're clear on the practical, we can look at the aspects, the percentage that we don't quite have the science for yet, and maybe never will.
Yeah.
And the quote I want to share is, so this is what I have started answering because we work in coaching. And so sometimes someone, a student or a client will ask me, what's your life purpose, Anne? And I say, my life purpose is a quote, and it is by the French theologian Teilhard de Chardin, who was a mystic. And he said, science, philosophy, and religion are bound to converge as each draws nearer to the whole. My life purpose is to do what I can to help with that convergence. So that's what I love, is not that it's either you're a woo-woo fairy or you're a
Hardcore scientist.
hardcore scientist who's an atheist, but that we can find the convergence. And we are in a time of the convergence, in my belief.
Yes. And back to the quote, uh, the way I see also my life purpose, and I see this in you, is also helping people draw them closer to the whole,
To
because
the
I see this
convergence.
in clients. And there is often, here's the bucket of my humanness. Well, what happens? Where's your spirit?
Well, and
You know?
I don't know about you, but I've had clients who they have both, but their spirituality is like in the closet.
In
And
the
I
closet.
used
You
to
know, they need to come out first.
like closeted
I know,
spirituality. And
totally. I
I
always
used
find that fascinating.
I do too. So I have to share a story. So I used to train in a for a very, very big international company that had a very good leadership program. And I did coaching within that leadership program. And I coached high potential leaders, did this for years. And these leaders, I would get X number of sessions with them. And I would always ask them at the beginning, as part of my intake with them, what are your spiritual beliefs? What's important to you? Because I really want to honor that.
Yeah, of
And if
course.
someone is deeply Muslim or Christian or Jewish, I want to walk with honor with that,
Yes. Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And about 10% of the time, I kid you not, it was at least 10% of the time, and it was men and women, they
Yeah.
would say things like, it's almost like they'd look around, they'd go, well, so I read this book by Eckhart Tolle. Have you heard of him? like, and I thought it was really cool. Or, my wife has me reading this thing by so and so. I'm like, but don't tell anyone. I started saying to them, could you please tell each other? Because you could have a club, because there are way more of you in this organization than you have any idea.
Mm.
Would you please just come out of the closet?
You know. Well, and not only that, and I totally agree. I mean, I have that. I certainly can have that. I have that statistic as well. The funny thing is, then when you start talking with them about it, there is a there's almost a relief that
Yeah,
they can come out of the closet.
yeah,
There's a blossoming of
yeah,
it and an expansion, and there starts to be a different energy in the space
yeah.
when they
And
come out
we,
of the closet. And it feels like that people really need it and want it, but they're afraid to come out of the closet. And I
that's,
don't know why. Why is that?
well, I think because this view sometimes in the world is that it's either the mystery
Yeah,
or it's the logical, and
yeah,
never the twain shall meet. And the other
yeah,
thing that has been there's many things that I find surprising, and I just think, how long have you been doing this, Anne? Why does this surprise you? Because one of the other things that will surprise me from time to time is I'll be working with a client who, in their conversation with me, in this safe, confidential space, is incredibly in touch with their spirituality and their wisdom. And I'll just assume that that's how they are. But dig a little deeper, we'll realize that it's two separate buckets, and how they're operating, like in their organization or family, is the practical one. And the only place they give full flight to the deeper who they are is with me.
yeah.
And sometimes I'll miss that because they're so articulate and so connected in our conversation. I'll be like, Anne, you need to check whether this is just your energy field or if this is who they're able to be
Yeah.
in the world. And much of the time, they're not being it in the world because they're scared.
Well, and and I just wanted to say that it's also the world really also does not make it easy, especially,
Fair.
these days to come out of the closet because there is so much judgment around various religions, particular, and people have been traumatized through it. There are
Abused through
war,
it.
people
You're
kill each other in the sake for the sake of religion, and so I think we are in a state where people really are literally have to be careful talking about their spiritual life because the
you
world is
know,
judgmental about it.
It's really interesting because you're making me remember that the CEO of Medtronic years ago, and I think he was the second CEO, not the founder, but I think he's like the next guy, Bill George, and
Yes.
who was beloved. And it
Yep.
was like
I
a
remember him
golden,
well.
golden age for Medtronic. I heard him speak at one point where he was talking about his stand for spirituality in the workplace, not religion. It's not about any particular religion, but when you bring spirituality through things like purpose and meaning, you create greater engagement. And Medtronic, I don't know if they still do this. Maybe somebody can put in the comments if they do. But back in those days, Medtronic makes medical devices like heart pacemakers and things like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Medical device company based in Minnesota. And they would do something every year where they would bring in people who his lives had been changed
Yes.
through these devices. And you couldn't get in unless you're a Medtronic employee. And other people would try to get in and you just couldn't because, the auditorium was full. And, everyone's in tears
Yes.
because it was a spiritual moment of, oh my gosh, this matters. And what I do matters to people. And I hope they still do it because I think it's something that gets lost.
Yes.
And I want to say one other thing. If you're in an organization and you've got millennials and Gen Zs, you better be darn sure you bring this back. You
Yes.
find a way to bring this because this is what they're looking for. It's what they're looking for. They want to know that their life matters
Matters.
and what
Absolutely.
they're doing is more
Yeah.
than just a paycheck.
Yeah.
And if you can't prove that, they're going to find another way to do it.
Yeah, I'm currently coaching a 25 something who is in a PhD program at Stryker, who does, replacement knees and stuff like that. And that's her conversation. I want to know, first of all, I need to be in a collaborative environment, and I want to see that I matter. I want to see that I have impact, and it needs to be seen. It cannot just be under the surface. I actually need people to tell me.
Yeah.
And it's so clear that that's the direction, that's her compass, that's how she wants to live. And so in this rotation program, luckily she's got a couple of really good managers that are really, really leaning in and saying, look what you did in your research. This matters.
And then it's, what is that famous quote? I don't know who said it. Somebody probably knows. But, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And maybe this is a good thing to go out on,
Yeah,
from this conversation. Both Ursula and I have no intention of retiring, because retire from what?
yeah,
Our lives are joyful. Our work is joyful.
yeah,
And why would I not want to do that anymore? I might want to do it differently. We might want to do it less. There are all sorts of ways the form could change. But
yeah,
the idea that I'm just going to stop comes from a mindset, I believe, that says my work doesn't have spiritual connection or meaning.
yeah. No, absolutely. And, the impact that it matters, that it gives our life meaning and purpose, I mean, it's been clear to me for, the last 20 odd years. But I think it is also because there is room for spirit. I'm not sure I would be as deeply connected
Well,
our work without
I
it.
know,
There would be something missing for me.
without kind of the mystery of it
Yeah.
all, without kind of saying, okay, we've laid out everything we can. And I even see this in our trauma course and in healing.
Yes.
That one of the last things, I just completed a trauma course with a wonderful group, and one of the last things we talk about, because there's a scope and sequence to working with folks that are recovering from
Yeah.
trauma. And there are questions you don't ask early that you can ask later. And one of the questions later is, what have you learned from this? What
Mm-hmm.
has been the meaning? What has been the blessing?
Yeah.
And it's powerful when people can get there authentically.
Mhm.
It moves it into the realm of non-attachment. It's like,
Yeah.
maybe it wasn't my preference,
Mm.
but wow, these things happen that couldn't have happened any other way. And therefore, I can be okay with this.
And I think that's definitely a question from the more spiritual, mystical realm, is looking at life events that seem to be completely, on the human level, seem to be meaningless. And it's sort of like, how did I get here and why am I here? There's often the only answer can be found, in the mystical realm of saying, I don't know yet, but it will be revealed. It will be revealed down the road, maybe a year from now, 2 years from now, who knows?
Who
But the,
knows?
the reason why will eventually be revealed, and that does not fit into the,
No. And when you can stand in that sort of perspective,
yeah,
which often gets created by going through a dark night of the soul, and that surrender that you talked about earlier, what the research shows is that it is powerfully protective against depression.
yeah,
Powerfully. And if you're curious about any of that, you want to read a book called by Lisa Miller, who is a PhD psychologist at Columbia, and she wrote a beautiful book called The Awakened Brain, and we'll put that in the show notes. So
yes,
thank you for this great conversation. I really just
yes,
lovely to talk about how we're not just scientists, but we're also
yeah,
really freaking woo-woo too.
yes, we are, and we love both.
We love both.
So thanks everybody for listening, and hopefully this was interesting to you. And another show will be coming soon. Okay, take care. Thank you.
Bye.